Aloha, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Friday Night Kunani Patrol, the podcast with the goal of creating a community of optimal human beings. I am your host, Mikuni Munsayak, and today's optimal human being is Dr. Richard Mak. Dr. Richard Mak, calling all the way from New York. Sir, please introduce yourselves and tell the listeners what it is that you do.
All right. So my name is Dr. Richard Mak. I'm a physical therapist. I've been practicing for over 12 years. Been doing Muay Thai for over 8 years or so. Some BJJ, a little MMA, but really just mostly Muay Thai. I launched my business, the MMA Doc, a year ago, almost a year ago, like during the pandemic. And it's really taken off. I've just had a lot of experience just working with like my fellow training partners and fighters and the fight team. And then just during the pandemic, I had friends like just in different parts of the world, and we started working together. And then when I launched, things just kind of grew because I just saw a big need of what's going on with combat athletes. So I do have a strength and conditioning background. I do have MDT, which is kind of McKenzie. I just basically teach people how to rehab their own injuries. So I combine that with my background in strength and conditioning, and the results have been awesome. They're just training smarter. They're owning their own injuries, and they're doing well. So awesome. Thanks for having me.
I wish I had met you a few years ago when I first started my MMA journey, because I definitely could have used all of your wisdom and expertise, because I know I've done a lot of irreparable damage to myself just overtraining.
Yeah, it's a very common, man. There's so many combat athletes that just train themselves into the ground. And generally, that message I always put forward is to train smarter and just really have a coach that just watches over you and really just make sure that you're doing things efficiently instead of just volume. And generally, once I make things efficient for them and take out the guesswork, they do really well. And they're happy with the balance they have with their life and training.
So when you're working with all these athletes, let's talk about common trends you see as far as combat sports athletes and common trends that are preventing them from performing optimally.
A number of them, there are different buckets that they fit into. One is the combat athlete that only focuses on skills training. They just, they just keep rolling or just sparring or doing Muay Thai or pads, and they don't do any strength and conditioning. And then they notice that when they're doing these long hours in the gym, all of a sudden they get all these nagging injuries that pop up. And that's because their body really didn't build up this capacity to handle that load. So that's when you kind of get these quote unquote overuse injuries. And combine that with not sleeping well, not recovering well, then obviously they're going to get sidelined. And then when they get sidelined, they get frustrated because once it gets better, they rest it and it feels a little somewhat better. They jump in and they double down on it to make up for their lost time. And then so it's just a vicious cycle. So I get them out of that cycle.
Oh my goodness. So you're saying that these people they don't have like the prerequisite strength at first to be like going through the motions that they're doing, which is causing them to have the injuries?
Yeah, there's just a number of people that they just kind of focus on their technique, which is fine. But the thing is, like, as you train for longer and longer hours, especially when you're getting ready for fight camps and stuff like that, the training loads is just a lot. And if you are not building a base level of strength to handle those loads, along with recovering well, you're just asking to get injured and sidelined, and that's when all the combat athletes start looking for quick fixes. The CBD or massage gun or taping it up. Like they'll always look for a quick fix to get them back on the mats. But if they train smarter, you generally kind of avoid all that.
So from a medical standpoint, like what's happening to the body physiologically when these fighters are overtraining and not recovering properly and training through all these injuries, like what's happening to them?
Basically, when you don't have a nice base level of strength, your muscles and your tendons and joints and everything, they don't really, and they're not able to handle all that load of training. So over time, once you exceed the load or the capacity of your body, then that's when things kind of start breaking down and it feels like irritated, right? Also, when they don't sleep and recover well, that's always another issue, because the body repairs itself by sleeping well and recovering well, and make sure you eat and hydrate enough. And a lot of combat athletes don't do that. So if they are training themselves into the ground, they don't really have this base level of strength, and now they're not sleeping and recovering well. Their body is just always in this state of stress, and it's just gonna, quote unquote, I would always say redlining. Like if you're ever in a car, you just put your pedal to the metal and it's just always in that red zone. Over time, it's just gonna break down and just fail on you.
So you said stress, and that's a big thing that I talk to, because I do online coaching as well, and I always try to tell my clients, like, if you're stressed out and your body's not really going to give you the results that you want. So like, as far as stress, can you explain to the listeners like what the cortisol is doing to the body?
Yeah, cortisol. Obviously, the stress levels definitely will affect your food cravings. Generally, you will tend to hold on to fat a little more because you tend to have a little more stress eating. So if you're not sleeping enough, and say you're a combat athlete that wants to make weight, like it's going to be harder when you don't sleep very well. Okay. And also, you just add, when you don't sleep enough, you are more prone to injuries. Like they've done studies on it. I don't know the exact figures, but if you are getting 6 hours or less a night, or less than 6 hours, you are at high risk of injuries. And when you start getting like 7 to 8 to 9, then your risk of injuries are a lot less. So those are the things I really kind of hammer down with my athletes, and I monitor them because I do have a Whoop, and I have my athletes wear a Whoop, and I just monitor everything for them and take the guesswork out of that, just coach them on it.
I know there's some people who will like to flex the fact like, oh, I can run off of 4 hours of sleep or 5 hours of
Yeah.
sleep. I'm like, yeah, that's cool, bro. But I mean, if you want to be like optimal, you need more than 5 hours of sleep, right?
Yeah, it's huge, right? The team no sleep, that's just like team injured, team not making it to the top levels. Any combat athlete that is serious about training and they want to make it to those elite levels, like, you really have to get all your habits down and just build a solid foundation. Because if you are not sleeping well, you don't do any strength training or anything like that, and you're just kind of patching up your injuries, good luck trying to make it to those elite levels, and then even making it to the top of that. Because generally, when you get all the really big fish, they tend to have those things in order because they understand that nothing goes to waste. They don't want to leave anything to chance.
Yeah, I think we need to start glorifying people to take this more balanced approach, because right now on social media, I just think people are too obsessed with going ham, going extreme, doing things like David Goggins challenge and just destroying themselves. And it's this culture that is being built up. And especially even for the younger generation, like I don't want them to keep doing that to themselves.
Yeah, I have like an older combat athlete. He's not old, but he's like in his 30s, and his goal is like he wants to, make it to like the Ultimate Fighter, like UFC and stuff like that. And the thing was, like, he's had years of bad coaching. Like, it was just training him into the ground. He didn't recover well or anything like that. He was always felt beat up, injuries and stuff like that. And you could look at his account, and when he did with a previous coach, it looks cool, like these Instagram worthy exercises. But the thing was, he was always trashed, and it didn't do well for his performance until I really started cleaning up his routine. Now he's recovering a lot better. He's able to push harder during his skills training. And he's like, wow, I feel a lot better. I was like, yeah, because you're recovering better. So I really kind of clean things up, stick to the fundamentals. And then from there on, then we can kind of like progress things along.
All right. So if anybody's listening to this, recovery is crucial, guys. Make sure you get your recovery in, because that's where your adaptations happen. So, Doc, I see you're a big advocate on not just lifting. Like, if you're an MMA fighter, you shouldn't be lifting CrossFit. You shouldn't be lifting like a power bodybuilder. You should be lifting sport-specific weights. Can you explain your concept on that, your opinion on that?
So for combat athletes, like if you're lifting, it's fine. It's better than doing nothing. But the thing is, as you become more serious about your training and you really need this balance of stuff, that's when lifting like a power lifter or lifting like a CrossFitter doesn't quite serve your needs. Because let's say like a power lifter, yeah, they just focus on heavy lifts, and it's fine. I had a number of people that did power lifts, but then they always complained to me like, "Hey, man, I feel slow." I was like, "Okay." I was like, "Yeah, I'm strong, but I just feel slow." And I was like, "Okay," because there's no progressions to it. It's not just lifting 5x5s. Like I take them through progressions of things and say, "Okay, you know what? We build a base level of strength. Now let's start working on your power and explosiveness." And generally, they feel more balanced with those things. With CrossFitters, like yeah, they're doing explosive movements and stuff like that, like high intensities and stuff like that. But the issue is that CrossFitters like to overtrain. They just kind of like, train to the point where they're just on the floor in a pool of sweat and exhausted. And the thing is, if you're doing skills training and you're doing that as well, then you're just asking to get injured and just worn out, and basically you're hindering your progress. So I really kind of like take that guesswork out and be like, this is what you need. Keep things efficient so you can make the most out of your skills training. And generally, once they understand that, they feel a lot better with their performance.
I think if they understood the concept, like there's that SAID principle, right? Specific adaptations to impose demands, then things would make sense. Like you don't want to just squat, whatever, deadlift, whatever. It has to be like specific lifts that are going to help your technique to be stronger and more efficient, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it really all depends on like their lifting experience or injuries and stuff like that. So it really has to be customized to you. Some people can get template workouts and it's okay, but then others, like the template workouts, are just so complicated and it doesn't suit their needs that they just wasted their money.
So what do you recommend? Because I mean, as a mixed martial artists and combat sports athletes, there's a lot to learn and they got so many things to focus on. So how can they balance skills training as well as strength and conditioning?
I would say just get a coach, like generally a knowledgeable coach. It really helps. Like obviously I'm a coach, but it really takes out the guesswork of things. There's just so much things overwhelmed. I have a number of combat athletes that they just don't have the time because they don't have the time to research every single thing and then understand like what's good information, what's bad information. And they're busy working. It's not like they just train all day and they can live off that. They have to work, they have to balance life, family, and stuff like that. So once I kind of offload a number of stuff off their plate, then they are mentally a lot better, but physically a lot better too, because now they just know like, all right, this is what I just need to do.
Yeah, like I said, I wish I had met you years ago because when I first came, I just had just a jujitsu coach or just an MMA coach and no one to really handle all of the different aspects. And like you said, take the guesswork out. And that would have been so much better for me years ago.
Yeah, life is short, man. Life is short, and you know, you don't want to waste your time just doing all the guesswork. Especially as you get older and then injuries piled up, and then all of a sudden now you're like, oh man, like, am I going to last in this sport? But if you start training smarter at an earlier age, then your career just lasts a lot longer.
All right, so to everyone listening, train smarter, not always harder. Train smarter first, then harder, I guess, right? That's the order.
Yeah, generally once you kind of find like this optimal balance of stuff, then we can start pushing things along the way. But I always make sure there's a solid foundation first, then we can start playing around with stuff.
Do you do a lot with mindset training as well?
Yeah, there's a number of athletes that I have. Generally, I will improve their strength and conditioning and stuff like that. But then all of a sudden, like I've noticed that I've made them better people. They're just a better person overall. They're sleeping better. They have better habits. They're eating better. They're more mindful of stuff. They have more confidence. There's I have one athlete. He was always nervous, but he's doing a smoker this weekend. And I just really just kind of like worked on his mindset. Like, dude, you need to believe in yourself. I sent him a book just about making affirmations about yourself, and he feels more confident about himself now. He's enjoying the process versus, oh my God, this is coming up. What am I going to do? So mindset is very key. So generally, once you start believing yourself, then you kind of put out that true self to the world, and then generally your results will show.
So powerful. So if anybody's listening to this, I hope you guys can start doing these positive affirmations because like when I tell people about doing positive affirmations, they're like, oh, okay, yeah, just speak good thoughts. But there's something powerful about it. Like when you tell yourself something enough times, you'll believe it. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So might as well start telling yourselves the right things.
It work for my own self with my business. Like in the beginning when I launched, I was like, oh man, like, am I good enough on this or for this and all that stuff? But after a while, like, when we chat, like I just know, like, hey, I know my shit. So it's like, I know my shit. The results show, like, all right. So like, there's no nervousness. I was like, I just know it.
Nice. So what is your opinion on like hard sparring? Because that's a big topic that a lot of newbies are talking about nowadays, and
Mhm.
it's a hot topic. So what's your opinion on hard sparring?
Hard sparring, maybe if you're getting ready for a fight and your fight can't, like, it has its purpose at sometimes, but frequent hard sparring is just not worth it, especially with concussions. Generally, concussions are often missed. I always watch over my fighters with that. Generally, if they have hard sparring and they complain of a headache, I was like, okay, you probably have a concussion. You need to like lay off the sparring for a while, and then we kind of monitor your symptoms. But generally, they don't understand what a concussion is. They think, oh yeah, if I get knocked out, I have a concussion. But no, if you get your bell rung, or you get a little lights, or feel a little nauseous or headache, you probably have a concussion. And the thing is, if you don't fully recover and you get another concussion, then you get an additive effect. So basically, you just dug a bigger hole for yourself, and now it's much harder to climb out of. And that's when people start having a lot of these issues.
Oh my, so what would be your opinion on what's your opinion on those guys who like take fights after fights after fights without recovering enough in between?
It's not the best idea. Like I'm sure you know, Lethway and stuff like that. They get
Uh,
knocked out and they get like what 3 minutes to recover and jump back in. Like they're not going to last very long because you got a concussion and now you're going to get another concussion. Like your career is going to be very short. And the bad stuff happens to the brain when you get that additive effect. And obviously there's a life after fighting, so it's not worth it.
yeah, I mean, it's cool probably for your ego at the time, but I mean, if you want to think longevity and you want to do this for a while, then concussions and taking care of your brain is something you guys got to really think about.
Mhm.
Um, what is what would you recommend for like best equipment? Because I mean, during these COVID times now, everybody's working out mostly at home. What are your best the best equipment for home workouts for combat sports athletes?
With combat athletes, I have a number of them that had to just work out during lockdowns because gyms were closed. I always just tell them like, hey man, let's get a set of stackable resistance bands, sandbag, okay, a pull-up bar, and then we can go from there. And generally, I have a heart rate monitor with my athletes, so I can monitor their cardio. But yeah, I could get a lot of stuff done with just that.
So why do you prioritize? I see you do a lot of work with the heart rate monitors, the stuff that you post. That's not something I was into at first, like even tracking those numbers, but now that I pay attention to my heart rate and during my workouts, it's added a different element. So why do you encourage using heart rate monitors?
Heart rate monitors, like kind of like what I do, I just take the guesswork out of things, right? So if you were just doing it by feel, um, you don't really know how hard you're working. And generally, a lot of combat athletes they just like to run for miles and stuff like that by feel. They're like, oh yeah, I ran it in a 6 minute pace or whatever. And yeah, that's cool. But the thing is, for the adaptations that goes on in the body, like you really have to work at certain levels. And generally, when I view that data and I understand, like, all right, you're working at this levels, you're recovering at this level, or you're able to maintain at this level, then I know, like, all right, these are the positive adaptations that are going on in your body that will help your gas tank. So, a lot of my athletes, they just notice that their gas tank has tremendously improved because I really kind of monitor stuff and guide them along the way with that.
That's so awesome that you monitor data rather than just because the average coach will kind of just be like, oh, just look at them, just eyeball things, but you have the actual numbers to run things off of, which is going to help the fighters and the athletes be more optimal and efficient. That's fantastic. So what is your best advice to fighters like after a tough fight?
After a tough fight, you definitely gotta recover. Make sure you don't have a concussion. Really, just kind of eat, hydrate enough, and then there's that always that mentality that jump right back into training the Monday right after a fight. But if your body's not ready, you may need a little rest period. And then you go, because fight camps are brutal, man. I've worked with a number of fighters that they just go through fight camp. They put their life on pause, right? They just time away from their spouse, their family, and everything just to focus on fight camp. And you almost have to reset and just kind of get that balance again, and then get back to work. Because if you just say, "Oh well, I'm just going right to the gym right after a fight," and just keep continuing, generally they all burn out, either physically or mentally. They're just like, "All right, I don't want to do this anymore."
Yeah, I remember after my first Muay Thai fight back in Vegas, I tried to go back in the gym like the Monday after, and I couldn't even do a push-up, man. I was so weak. My arms were still sore from getting kicked in the arms, and so
Yeah.
never again with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, but it's common, right? That's the old school mentality, and generally, my message is always about kind of finding that balance and then really training smarter. So hopefully, those old school mentality approaches kind of fades away, and then people are training efficiently now.
Yeah, hopefully, because I one thing I try to tell them is that your body's not just going through physical stress, like the anxiety of the fight leading up to the fight. That's a lot of stress that's being put on you as well, and that's weeks and weeks and weeks, and especially the day of the fight, like that's a lot of stress that your body's going through. So you got to recover from.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that adrenaline, like a lot of fighters get the adrenaline dump, or afterwards they just feel like they just want to go to bed. They're just wiped out. So
Or just the fact
you got
that
to recover from that.
after dehydrating yourself and then fighting for your life for 15, 25 minutes, like, man, your body is so trashed after. Like, give yourself time to
Yeah,
recover.
yeah, yeah. Especially if they're doing bad weight cuts, they're just drained.
That's a whole nother topic. Do you lead your fighters through weight cuts as well?
Um, Somewhat. None of these fighters really are doing weight cuts yet. I have one pro fighter, but he's always on weight, like, so that's good. Like, I always recommend fighters to be really near their fight weight, like the dramatic weight cuts and all that stuff. Like, it doesn't serve them well, because once you cut all that water out, it puts a lot of stress on your body, and when you don't hydrate enough, like, you're going to feel a little worn out, but also you're more prone to concussions as well. So it doesn't serve you well to do all these crazy water cuts.
Do you have any research or evidence, I don't know, like stuff that you've heard or read about long-term effects on weight cut on the body and what it does?
um I don't have any studies on me. I do remember reading something where the performance differences between someone like cutting like more water weight versus someone that's a little more on par with their weight, the performance advantages wasn't as much. But obviously it depends on the weight class too. It's like if someone's just coming in tremendously bigger, then yeah, that's a big issue. But it's not good for their career, because you're just cutting so much water out.
But I mean, like what, in your opinion, with these people doing these weight cuts like every 3 months, years and years, over and over, what do you think that will do to the body long term?
There is a dietitian that I do follow. She did kind of mention like the dramatic weight loss, and that it does affect you, because all of a sudden now your ability to just gain muscle is affected, and you just generally put on more fat because of this yo-yo dieting all the time. Because so generally, if you are used to blowing up between fights and then trying to work your way back down in a fight camp, like, over time, you're just wrecking your body. So generally, if you are more in line with your fight weight, and you don't really have to cut much weight, like, you will be healthier in the long run versus all these dramatic cuts.
Yeah, I fight at 155 and I try to stay around 165, 167, just so the
Yeah,
weight
and that's good.
plastic.
Yeah, that's good. They're like, you don't want the people that they're like 185. Like, yeah, I'm gonna drop down.
Never, dude. I would never ever want to cut that much weight. No, thank you.
Yeah, it's insane.
So what would an optimal training session look like to you? Because I mean, I know it's going to vary on the individual, but I mean, if you were to craft like an outline, a perfect workout, what would it look like? Like stretch first, warm up first, do like a ballistic, I don't know. Like what would be your optimal training session?
Uh, it, I would just say a training week
Okay.
would be more
Okay.
optimal depending on what's going on. Like they'll get their number of skill sessions per week, maybe like 3, 4, maybe 5 or so. But then the strength training, depending on what's going on with that, sometimes I may get them 2 or so, 2 or 3, depending on how much they can handle. Cardio sessions, it could be like generally like about 3 or 4, really depending about what's going on. But I tweak those things along the way, to really depending on what's going on with the fighter. I have another fighter that's really busy with school, grad school and working and fighting and stuff like that. I really have to tweak her schedule just to make sure that she's recovering well enough, but she's still pushing the needle forward. And then I have another fighter that it's not as busy, so I can push the pace a little more or the loads, and he's responding really well as well. So that's where the coach kind of takes that guesswork out.
So in a week, strength and conditioning, what, twice a week, 3 times a week?
Yeah, 2, 3, depending on what's going on. It really depends on your fitness levels, your life. Like it really depends. And once I really speak with my athletes, I was like, okay, this is probably a better schedule for you, and let me know how you do with this. And then generally they say, oh, this is really good, or hey, at some points life is too much. I was like, okay, we're going to cut this out. I'll do this. I'll leave this in. Your fitness level's okay at this level. Okay, so I'll take this session out and we could focus on that. And then generally, and then when I monitor their training load, see how hard they're pushing during their training. And then it's like, okay, you're really pushing this much. You probably don't need this type of session right now. We'll just focus on something else.
So for cardio, is it possible to have good cardio for combat sports without running?
Yeah, you can. Like running, they always think like you need to run all the time. You don't have to run. There's just people do airdyne, people bike or anything like that. It's really about maintaining your heart rate and really carrying it over into your sport, because you can do all the cardio you want, but you're not carrying it over into your training and you just gas out. So I always make sure that there's a carryover.
So the guys who are running 10K religiously just to run it, you wouldn't advise that, because it's probably just going to end up destroying their knees and it's not really specific for the sport.
No, it really depends. Some people enjoy the 10Ks and stuff like that, but do you need to run a 10K every single day like in Thailand? Like probably not, but it depends. Like I'll have some athletes run a 10K and that's okay, but I wouldn't make them run every day. It really depends on what's going on with them. If they have a bunch of injuries, then yeah, I may modify things, but running is safe. It's not going to wreck you.
I just think that it's interesting that the culture, because I was talking to another fighter and he said that in Thailand, the culture is to overtrain you and to really run you in the ground. And that's just
Yep.
how they've been doing it for ages. And that's just the culture. And
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we shouldn't just stick to tradition. We need to evolve, right?
Yeah. So I have some fighters in Thailand, and one was the pro fighter. He had that issue where he was just doing the Thai way and just training himself into the ground. He would get sick often and just didn't really feel good. And then once I really cleaned up his training, got a heart rate monitor, really monitor his loads, he just noticed that he was getting fitter in a quicker amount of time versus to what he was doing before. So keeping things efficient, he got more gains.
Damn.
Because
Okay. Being aware of your time, let me ask you 2 more questions. What's your opinion on headgear for sparring?
Headgear for sparring. So headgear really prevents cuts and bruises and stuff like that. It doesn't really prevent concussions. So if you think like I have some headgear I can wail away and it's safer, no, like it's not, because what goes on in the brain, it's concussions are a stretch injury of the brain. It's not your brain just slamming into your skull. It's like there's a stretch injury and then it retracts, and then all of a sudden the brain gets really excited and uses all this energy, and then it drops, and then the energy levels of the brain just drops, and that's like what we call a master energy depression of what's going on in the brain. And then that's how a concussion occurs. So if you're using headgear and you're hitting hard and stuff like that, the brain is still stretching. It's not going to prevent anything with that. It will prevent you from getting cuts, but it won't prolong your career as a fighter using headgear for concussions.
Just because you have a headgear, guys, doesn't mean you guys can go gung-ho and start blasting each other in the head, because concussions can still happen.
And your head's a bigger target, and sometimes with the headgear you can't see what's coming, right? So if you can't see what's coming, you can't really brace yourself for it, and then all of a sudden you get a little quick hit and your chin rotates, then all of a sudden you get a concussion. So generally that's what happens.
Yeah, the ones that I hate most are the ones that come across here, those headgears that block the nose, because you can't see when they change levels, and then you just caught with uppercuts and body shots all day. Oh man. Okay, last question. What does optimal human performance mean to you, Dr. Richard Mak?
Optimal human performance, that basically means a balance with everything. So optimal human performance, balance with your training, strength and conditioning, your life. There's a big thing that I really focus on a number of my athletes, that they're enjoying life, not just focusing on training all the time. So generally there's a mental aspect to it. So when they feel good about their training and they're making the gains and not taking so much time away from their personal life, they generally are more at peace with themselves. Because if they're just training all the time, getting frustrated, spinning their wheels, not knowing what to do, and seeing the gains that they like, then I would say, yeah, you need a coach. And once the coach really kind of takes that guesswork out and provides that balance, overall, your life just becomes a lot better.
All right, you guys heard it from Dr. Richard Mak. Get some balance in your life, guys, and work with a professional so you guys will stop guessing and run yourselves into the ground.
Yeah. All right. So I do have a training pipeline worksheet. So the link is in my bio, and a number of people love it because they really didn't look at those aspects of their training, because they just think, oh, it's just skills training and strength conditioning. It's like, no, it's just your sleep and recovery, how you injure, how much you eat, and also like how you manage your injuries. Generally, once you get all those leaks sealed up, generally your performance is a lot better on fight night. But if you have all these leaks, like, you're just struggling on fight night.
I agree 100%. Once I got my my sleep in check, my hydration in check, my nutrition in check, started managing my stress, then everything started just feeling way better, like mentally, physically, just everything. So where can the listeners reach you at? Instagram, Facebook?
Instagram, just hit me up at the MMA Doc. You can always DM me, and we can always chat. Definitely download my free training pipeline worksheet. It's always something, if you're serious about being a combat athlete, always really to sit down and really analyze your training and to understand, like, there's probably some leaks to seal up and really make things more efficient for you. But yeah, once you DM me, we chat, and I understand, like, all right, you may benefit from having a coach, then yeah, we'll chat and we'll work it out.
Cool. So all you combat sports athletes who might be overtrained or might have injuries, or you just need some help, hit up the MMA Doc and he can help you guys out. Dr. Richard Mak, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you. Any last shout outs before we close this up?
No, but thanks for having me, man, because the message is growing, and business is growing on my end, and it's just a big need for combat athletes. So I just want more combat athletes to just kind of start training on the right path and generally just kind of fulfill their dreams.
I think there's a bigger need for medical professionals who practice combat sports so they can have a better understanding from our perspective as well. So God bless you, and thank you so much for what you do.
Oh, thank you, man.
All right, Dr. Richard Mak, thank you so much. This is Mikuni Munsayak signing out. Aloha. Mahalo for listening to another episode of Friday Night Kunani Patrol. Feel free to follow my journey at Kunani Patrol on Instagram and Mikuni Munsayak on Facebook. Also, be sure to click that like button, comment at least one thing that you learned from this episode, and share this episode with at least one person. Lastly, if you wish to support my journey, click on the Ko-Fi link in the podcast description. All donations will go towards creating more content to help you all live your best lives. I am Mikuni Munsayak, signing out. Aloha. Friday night,